The demonstrators also attacked the rampant corruption prevalent among Ukraine's ruling class. Tent cities were erected and there were concerts and food stalls. But as time went on, the demonstrations got increasingly violent. This took the form of heavy-handed policing, the kind we're used to seeing across much of the West. But there were also significant street battles between protesters and police, and the hostilities would end in tragedy. Between January and February, 108 protesters and 13 police officers were shot dead. The deadliest night was the 20th of February, when 45 protesters and 4 police were killed. Yanukovych would flee the country 2 days later. Significantly, who instigated the shooting remains contested. The pro-Maidan government, which replaced Yanukovych, blamed units of the police. Others have suggested that far-right snipers in buildings controlled by anti-government forces shot both police and protesters to escalate events. 9 years later, it remains unsolved. What is clear, though, is that far-right elements, even though they were a minority, did have a role in the Euromaidan movement. These flags were seen at the protests. They bear the symbol of Svoboda, an ultra-nationalist far-right party founded in 1995. After the Maidan revolution, it went on to briefly control 4 ministries in the new government. This is C14, also known as S14, a neo-Nazi nationalist group which began as the youth wing of Svoboda. It's known for its homophobic and anti-Roma attacks in Ukraine. In 2018, the US State Department recognized C4 as a hate group. Also spotted in the Maidan were plenty of these flags. They belong to Right Sector, another far-right paramilitary group formed in 2013 from an alliance of 3 existing nationalist groups. In 2014, it also sprouted a political party. Here, a young member explains political views.
Национал-социалистская тематика иногда в некоторых людях она есть проступает. Как бы, чтобы была единая нация. Но не у всех это не заложено в основе этой организации, это у некоторых людей есть.
А у вас?
У меня лично есть.
В смысле? Объясните.
Мне как бы нравится эта идея единой нации. Я хочу, чтобы нация была единая, чтобы один народ, одна страна, одна нация.
А это подразумевается что?
Чтобы чистая нация. Не то, что там, как бы у Гитлера как было, но в своем роде немножко, маленько, но было, чтобы своя нация.
Right Sector would go on to be accused of involvement in a massacre. The context here, after the removal of Yanukovych following the Maidan protests, counter-protests emerged in pro-Russian eastern Ukraine. The largest of these were in Odessa, where on the 2nd of May 2014, street battles between pro-Russian and pro-Maidan groups would end in tragedy. Surrounded by a mass of pro-Maidan protesters, anti-Maidan activists sought shelter in Odessa's trade union's house. Soon, it was in flames. It's not clear how the building was set alight, as both sides were throwing Molotov cocktails, but a large number of pro-Russian protesters were trapped inside while the building burned. Some jumped to try and save themselves and were then beaten by pro-Maidan protesters. At the time, the New York Times reported this. As the building burned, Ukrainian activists sang the Ukrainian national anthem, witnesses on both sides said. They also hurled a new taunt, Colorado, for the Colorado potato beetle, striped red and black like the pro-Russian ribbons. Those outside chanted, "Burn, Colorado, burn," witnesses said. Swastika-like symbols were spray-painted on the building, along with graffiti reading Galician SS, though it was unclear when it had appeared or who had painted it. In the end, 42 anti-Maidan activists were killed in fire. 9 years later, no one has been successfully prosecuted. Again, we should be clear, we're not describing these events and groups to suggest that the far right has mass support in Ukraine. Svoboda only has 1 seat in the Ukrainian parliament, while the right sector has none. But Ukraine's far right problem has less to do with the support they receive from the public and more the support they enjoy from the state. That includes from the courts. This is C14 leader Ivan Karas.
It's our general mission to totally ruin chains that connect our country with imperial power from the past.
And that being Russia.
Yes, it can tell Russia, not only Russia, Soviet Union.
Are you a Nazi?
No, I don't think I'm a Nazi, I'm a Ukrainian nationalist. And
What does that mean?
the main confrontation is about that some ethnic groups have control many business structures, some economic, some political forces, and
Which ethnic groups?
Russians and Jews and the Poles. It may be some non-Ukrainian group control a huge percent of some economic or political power. And of course, in this situation, Ukrainian people have some tension between it, and it causes conflicts.
Given what Karas said there, it might seem surprising that C14 won a 2019 libel case against a Ukrainian journalist who described them as neo-Nazis. The court ruled that to call them a neo-Nazi organisation harmed their reputation. The journalist had to pay damages. But when it comes to far-right impunity and the protection or toleration of fascist groups, no example is more profound than that of the Azov Battalion. The Azov Battalion was formed in Mariupol as a volunteer militia to take on pro-Russian separatists. Mariupol is in the east of Ukraine, in the region of Donetsk, whose capital had been taken over by pro-Russians. The Azov Battalion wanted to keep Mariupol Ukrainian, and the city was ultimately kept out of pro-Russian hands. This won Azov plaudits, and they were merged with the Ukrainian National Guard in November 2014. But make no mistake, integration into state structures does not mean Azov were just moderate professionals. These guys are really far right. Their insignia is the Wolf's Angel, an SS symbol used by the A division of the Nazi paramilitaries in Hitler's Third Reich. And the group was founded by this man, Andriy Beletsky. Beletsky's past statements include saying Ukraine's national mission was to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against Semite-led Untermenschen. Untermenschen means subhumans. Beletsky would resign as commander of the Azov Battalion in September 2014 after successfully standing for parliament, but Azov would continue to grow. They produce flashy recruitment videos like this.
Але цього вимагає наша мета, наша робота, наше покликання. Щомиті ми готові прийти до ворога зі своїми дарами смерті. Непомітно вийти з туману, знайти прихисток за стіною вогню. Кого важко вистежити, того неможливо зупинити. Ти можеш сам в цьому переконатися.
Oh fuck, oh fuck, shit, fuck. Fuck.
Приєднуйся.
And recruitment starts early. This is footage from a Guardian documentary on an Azov summer camp.
Тут не як в других лагерях. Тобто ми пропагандуємо здоровий образ життя, заняття спортом. У нас майже всі спортсмени. Тобто дітей, яких в табори відправляють там, де їх просто веселять, то в нас вже трохи інше направлення.
This is the future of Ukraine, of our nation. So we teaching children to love Ukraine.
Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україно! Україно! Помолитися!
That's right, you saw white pride tattooed on the back of someone's thighs. And besides fighting in eastern Ukraine and training kids to fight, Azov also runs the National Militia, a paramilitary group founded in 2017. This is footage of a national militia march in Kyiv in 2019.
You're watching somebody that's going to be on the list for knowing too much.
Beletsky. And while the national militia says its aim is to assist the police,
If I am to believe this propaganda.
branched out into thuggery. This is from a 2018 Newsnight report following the national militia in Lviv.
We then go to a place where punters can gamble on computer terminals. We're told it's been operating illegally, as its owners allegedly have links to Russia. It's unspectacular stuff. The national militia call the police out, and reluctantly they appear and go through the motions. What the National Militia want us to film is that they're a force for good, here to restore order and make the police do their job.
К сожалению, полиция не справляется со всеми проблемами, которые существуют в нашей стране. Естественно, мы, как патриоты Украины, возлагаем эти функции на себя.
It's a message that has some resonance. There's a growing despondency here about how little has changed. The next day, we're contacted by the company that owns the gambling shop. It turns out that many of their other branches have also been raided by the National Militia.
Где-то около часа дня к нам забежали группа молодых людей, человек 20-25.
This is the National Militia when journalists aren't watching.
В масках, с молотками, с битами, в куртках с надписью «Национальная дружина». Они кричали «Слава Украине», еще там какие-то свои лозунги. Начали здесь все просто громить, полная разруха. Все было побито абсолютно.
We're given other footage, which shows more places being trashed, men lighting fireworks indoors, even setting one location on fire. The National Militia tell us they're working alongside the police, but they have also, on several occasions, fought them. Here they brawled and used pepper spray on officers as they tried and failed to pressure a judge into keeping an allegedly corrupt politician in custody.
And the Azov Battalion has an international status. They explicitly seek to recruit foreign members from other far-right and nationalist groups in Europe and the US. That was explained in this excerpt from a 2021 Time investigation.
What worries officials in the West is Azov's recruitment strategy. It's tried hard to build friendships with far-right groups around the world, especially in the US and Europe. During my visit in 2019, I spent a day at one of the biggest recruitment events in Azov's history. Thousands of people showed up for a day of fighting sports and blatant propaganda. There were neo-Nazi symbols, tattoos, and posters all over the place. And many in the crowd seemed pretty receptive to Azov's far-right ideology.
Бути толерантним про ЛГБТшникам – це не природне. Для цього треба людині промити мозки. Поважати своїх батьків, любити своїх дітей, пишатися за свою країну – це нормально.
Events like this also tend to attract recruits from abroad. One of the ones I met was named Robin, who had just arrived in Ukraine from Sweden, where he told me he's wanted for hate crimes.
This is so hard to explain the surroundings for someone who's watching this, you know. It's surreal. It's like, I don't know, it's like something you read about the great Germany before, you know, in the 1920s. It's a revival of the Indo-European soul. And it's all happening here in Ukraine.
Also speaking to Time, Azov's head of international outreach explained their approach.
We basically recruited everyone who could hold weapons in their hand when Ukrainian state was paralyzed and the defense of Ukrainian state was totally in the hands of Ukrainian volunteers. So there were many war adventurers, guys who believed that they are on kind of ideological tool to save maybe the future of the West and so on and so forth. So
the future of the white race?
Or, yes.
So why have Ukraine's political class accepted Azov as part of the state? In part, this has to do with friends in high places. For example, Azov had close connections to Arsen Avakov, who was Ukraine's interior minister from 2014 until last year. As a 2016 Open Democracy piece explains, their relationship to the politician dated back many years. 2005 to 2010 was a fruitful time for Patriot of Ukraine, the Kharkiv neo-Nazi group whose members later came to form Azov. With Avakov as governor of Kharkiv, this neo-Nazi group cooperated with the Kharkiv authorities and police. Their activities included monitoring illegal immigrants in the city's student hostels and raiding shopping kiosks whose owners were, by coincidence, not loyal to the local authorities' material interests. In February 2014, Avakov became interior minister and began to patronize Patriot of Ukraine, Azov and Beletsky himself. Indeed, Beletsky, after having been recognized as a political prisoner and released from prison, was given a rank in Avakov's home ministry. Meanwhile, an ally of Beletsky, Vadim Troyan, headed up the Interior Ministry Kyiv branch. Avakov has now left the scene, but it now seems likely that the war will strengthen Azov Battalion's hand. They've already cast themselves as playing a leading role in resistance to the Russians, and just this week, a commander of the Azov Battalion made this appeal.
My name is Denis Prokopenko. I'm a commander of the Azov Regiment. The defense of Mariupol has already been going for 12 days. We as a regiment protectors of Mariupol are successfully fortifying our combat task on the front line. The enemy has not entered the city. Being surrounded since March the 1st by the increasing amount of the enemy troops, our soldiers holding on the defense of an important strategical place, the forepost of the Sea of Azov. The strength of our fighters has been already admired by the whole world. Dedication of the warriors has been highly evaluated by Ukrainians as well as people outside the country. Today is the time for determined actions. Delay can cost more and more human lives in the world. The Europe will heal for centuries. Create a no-fly zone over Ukraine, support with the modern weapon, organize the humanitarian aid for the civil people. We from our side will provide the kinds of support of the international aid to protect Mariupol, its people. During the historical time, we need to stop the aggressor together, saving Mariupol, saving the Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Worryingly, the framing of Azov as heroes, not just neo-Nazis who happen to be fighting on the right side, is being enabled by Western media. This is how Azov Battalion were described in a 2019 New York Times article. It says Azov is a Ukrainian neo-Nazi paramilitary organization. Now this is from 2022. Azov are now apparently a unit of the Ukrainian National Guard that has drawn far-right fighters from around the world. It doesn't mention that the reason neo-Nazis are attracted to Azov is because it's led by neo-Nazis. The change also applies to the big tech companies. According to a report from The Intercept, after the war on Ukraine was launched, Facebook changed its policy to now allow praise of the Azov Battalion so long as it's fighting the Russian invasion. Aaron, I want your take on this. I know we're on the same page. Putin's invasion of Ukraine is brutal and criminal. His so-called denazification plan is pure propaganda. But given that, does it still worry you that discussing the actual far-right problem has become a bit of a taboo?
Yeah, and it is a major problem, Mike. I think in 2010, when President Yushchenko awarded to Stepan Bandera, who was a fascist, the hero of Ukraine award. So this is a national ideology, an allegedly centre-right politician saying that a neo-Nazi, somebody who collaborated with the Wehrmacht and the SS, is welcome in modern Ukraine. And if you raise this now, of course, Putin's puppet. Listen, when you've got ultra-nationalist ideology, it's been around for 80 years in this country. It's going to be around for another 80 years. These are the last people we should be arming. I know that's probably not a particularly popular take on Twitter right now, but it's true. You know, in the Second World War, you had about the numbers aren't entirely precise, but you're looking at tens of thousands of people from Galicia and West Ukraine enlisted with the SS to fight against the USSR. Tens of thousands of people. Like I say, you've got Bandera, who was an ultra-nationalist fascist leader, member of the OUN, or I think it's called the OUN, which is a Nazi organization in Ukraine. And these are his modern-day descendants, and we're arming them. We are arming them, and they are a major part of Ukrainian civil society. Now, what's interesting, Michael, you mentioned Svoboda. In 2012, I believe they got something like 10% in the elections there, which is obviously significant. But it's not Jobbik at their peak in Hungary, for instance, which was, you know, towards 20%. Similar kind of politics. Similarly, you know, extreme right. It's the right of Fidesz in Ukraine. Jobbik, no. Same here. Svoboda, extremely right wing. And they've fallen away since. And if you look at the sort of political trajectory in Ukraine since 2004, since the Color Revolution, you get Yushchenko comes to power. He's our guy. What happens in the following election? I think he gets 5%. Because he fails to address the fundamental problems of the Ukrainian economy. We've seen depopulation, we've seen economic stagnation. A Ukrainian today is expected to have a life expectancy the same as it was in the 1960s, which is really extraordinary. I think you've seen the country's population contract by about 8 to 10 million since the 1990s. These aren't really statistics which apply to any other European country, which is why you see this political crisis after the mid-2000s. Ukrainians, quite rightly and understandably, want something better. They turn to Yushchenko. He doesn't change anything. He subsequently gets 5% in an election. And then you get the election of Yanukovych. Of course, he's removed in the Maidan protests. You can say what you want, but that's not democratic. It's not a democratic way to remove a leader. A democracy is the peaceful transition of political power from one holder of office to another. That's not democratic. He's then replaced by Poroshenko, who in the following election only gets, I think, 25% of the vote. He loses, of course, to the incumbent Zelensky. So what that tells you is whoever comes into power in Ukraine prior to Zelensky in this awful situation he finds himself in, they offer solutions to the country's massive economic, political, social problems, and they're boosted out pretty quickly because they appear to be intractable. And into those conditions, Michael, depopulation, stagnant living standards, life expectancy, just really comparative to other European countries, kind of falling off a cliff, those are the kinds of conditions in which the far right grows, let alone one which has got such historical roots like it does in Ukraine. And we're arming it. I think we're storing up massive, massive problems on the border of Europe, and we'll feel the consequence of those in 10, 20, 30 years' time. I could be wrong, and I really hope I am. But when you see Hillary Clinton say, well, look, in Afghanistan, we bled the Russians dry by arming the Mujahideen, that didn't really turn out well, did it, in the long term? So this could be history repeating itself a little bit. There are really very few instances of arming neo-Nazis and there not being negative consequences. And again, to use the historical parallels, we've been here before with NATO and the European/Atlantic defense establishment. In Italy, after the Second World War, there was a very powerful communist and socialist parties. Actually, in 1948, they came together. They wanted to win that election in 1948. You saw the United States inject millions of pounds funding right-wing and centrist parties in the 1948 election. You saw extraordinary propaganda efforts from the United States. Of course, the following year, Italy joins NATO. And what you have is the creation of these stay-behind networks. I did another Twitter thread on this actually earlier today, which are basically, if this country ever becomes a communist country, whether it's invaded by Russia or by democratic means, these stay-behind networks will effectively operate as a resistance network, a people's militia to make it ungovernable. But what do they do, Michael, over the next several decades, these stay-behind networks? Well, what they do is they subvert, undermine, toxify democratic politics within Italy, to the extent where they're actually undertaking terrorist activities. They're blowing people up and murdering people, Michael, in what's called strategy of tension, to undermine democratic politics, and in the hope, which was ultimately vindicated, that the Italian population would turn away from left-wing socialist ideas and want a stronger central Italian authority in the form of the state, to embrace a stronger security apparatus and to turn away from trade union activism, the Socialist Party, and particularly the PCI, the Communist Party. So this idea that you can embrace neo-Nazis in a broader anti-left sort of coalition, if you're talking about a democratic body politic and civil society in Ukraine 10, 20, 30 years from now, I think this is really going to hurt it, really going to hurt it. And is the future of Ukrainian nationalism a civic nationalism or an ethno-nationalism? I mean, that's up for grabs, by the way, Michael. And again, that's not me being a puppet of Putin. That's the objective situation. You have highly embedded neo-Nazi interests, groups, individuals within the Ukrainian state apparatus. To the extent that, like you say, they can lose elections, it doesn't really matter because they've got street mobs and they've got people embedded within the military. That's pretty bad, and it can do quite a lot.
I think we've got a couple of disagreements there, which I'm going to go back to in a moment. First of all, there was just a comment that really stood out to me that I want to address, which says pure propaganda, but also a very real problem. I can see what you're saying there. Is it inconsistent that we've said what Putin was saying was pure propaganda, but also far-right movements are a real problem in Ukraine? And the reason I say that's consistent is Vladimir Putin is not saying, I'm going, well, one, you wouldn't, invading a country to rid it of a far-right movement doesn't make any sense anyway. What he was saying is that the government of Ukraine is a Nazi government made up of drug addicts, and so his war of aggression is therefore justified because that's his aim. That's not his aim, and Ukraine doesn't need, the Ukraine government isn't a Nazi government. For various historical reasons, there is a very worrying and problematic influence that far-right groups have in Ukraine. That's partly because it's been a weak state for a while. The history of that country is slightly different. It's not the same as in Germany, where the Nazis were defeated and then you had a genuine denazification program in Germany after the Second World War. Some parts of Ukraine, it's not like we were part of the Soviet Union, we were part of that movement, especially in Western Ukraine. your experience of the Soviet Union was essentially being, was as empire. None of this enables you to call Ukraine a Nazi country, essentially. And one thing Putin is definitely not trying to do is denazify that country. In fact, this war is only going to empower them, as Aaron has been talking about. There's a thing I wanted to potentially push back on, Aaron. You sort of said that means these are the last people we want to be arming. But who are you talking about then? Are you talking specifically about Azov, or are you talking about the whole Ukrainian army and Ukrainian resistance?
No, the Azov battalion. And I think the United States and the UK and other countries should be saying, look, we need to build up the domestic military capabilities of Ukraine. Clearly, I think that's an entirely fair thing to do, but you obviously need some checks and balances. The Azov battalion they're far-right extremists, they're neo-Nazis, and I think if you're actually serious about building a long-term state infrastructure within Ukraine, you don't deal with those people. They're a faction within the state. They view themselves as they're trying to perpetuate a revolution through and within the state. You saw that guy there from Sweden say, "Oh my God, this is like 1920s Germany." It's a pure microcosm, of course, Michael. But they do have a revolutionary theory of change, which is creating this new world in the shell of the old. I don't buy horseshoe theory, the idea that left and right are the same, but this is an example of it. These people do not have an interest, Michael, in building a multicultural, liberal Ukraine where the rule of law applies to all. They are not interested in that. And so I think giving those people arms and making them a fundamental part of the Ukrainian state apparatus, I think is quite dangerous. Because even with Italy, we never did that. You did it informally, and you were saying in Germany there was denazification. There was to an extent, Michael, but actually a lot of Nazis were still integrated within the German post-war structure. And hey, Werner von Braun, he was working for NASA building the Saturn V rocket, and Kurt Waldheim went to the United Nations, so it wasn't entirely denazified, but there was significant denazification, certainly. What you're seeing here is something quite new, and the only sort of analog I can think of is with Spain. People say, well, what happened with Operation Gladio in Spain? And people say, well, the Spanish government was Gladio. That's what you have with Francoism. And that's what the Azov battalion would like to see in Ukraine. Now, I'm sure we can have a debate around that. And of course, right now, they're fighting a defensive war. They're calling it a patriotic war. I think that's precisely what it is. A defensive war against a far more powerful hostile actor. And I think the best argument to me is, well, you have to live in the real world. These are the people that are best situated to fight. They know what they're doing. They're effective soldiers, etc., etc. That's a good counter-argument. Believe me, that's going to hurt you in the long term. If you want a Ukraine that's built on the rule of law and equality under the law and civil liberties in the European Union,
red pepper.
you don't want these people in the state apparatus.
Don't do that. Oh my God.
Yeah. Just because the doctor's writing your script doesn't mean they're good for you.
Darum fordern wir Vernichtung des Systems der Ausbeutung. Her mit dem deutschen Arbeiterstaat. Deutschland.
Oh shit, I don't know if I can even play this shit. Can I?
Past and present.
I don't know.
In the Weimar Republic, the ideology of ethno-nationalism was widespread and eventually became the foundation of the Nazi regime.
The extreme right in Germany today is clearly drawing upon this old folkish ideology, this ethno-nationalism.
Right-wing extremists today are stoking fears of immigration and what they call the Great Replacement.
The Great Replacement is when the majority population, the native population, is displaced and replaced by a minority, when the ethnic composition of a population is turned on its head.
And once again, the new right's ethno-nationalist ideas are accompanied by racism and anti-Semitism.
Everyone knows which old parasites we're talking about.
The new right rejects today's Germany and believes the time is ripe for a national transformation.
There's a belief,
Yikes.
I think it's a delusional one, that the time has come to overthrow the system they hate, to overthrow democracy.
What does the Germany of today have to do with the Weimar Republic of nearly a century ago? What do they have in common? What parallels can we draw to a time just before the Nazi regime seized power, sweeping away hope, freedom, and peace?
There's this simple and catchy slogan, Berlin is not Weimar. That's a trivialization of history. Historical constellations don't repeat themselves in this one-to-one kind of way. The slogan also offers a kind of false reassurance. It implies we don't need to give much thought to anti-democratic developments that might be underway. It suggests that this comparison is meaningless. But I believe that some of what's happening now requires us to do exactly that, to undertake this comparison. The same kind of assault on democracy that happened in the Weimar Republic is being revived in a big way.
History might not repeat itself, but we can still learn from it. Students at a high school in Cologne are rehearsing a play about Holocaust survivor Tamar Dreyfus, who lost much of her family in the Nazi concentration camps. Working with Germany's Association for Information and Counseling for the Survivors of Nazi Persecution, they want to show how her story is still relevant to the present day.
By performing this piece, we might be able to get people interested in the whole issue again.
The past is important. We can learn from it so that we don't make the same mistakes.
In school, you notice that jokes about Jews...
Hey!
Those kinds of jokes
Right
are
on.
acceptable again.
Tamar Dreyfus has also observed the re-emergence of racism and anti-Semitism and believes that something needs to be done now to counter the trend. You once said,
Hi, Zero. Can you hear me?
What if that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. I was gonna ask.
How do I sound?
Oh, you sound good.
We don't want this. We don't want
Good,
to hear
good.
this anymore. It's
I still got it on push to talk.
to remember. Without remembrance, there is no
My background is really loud. Hey, I'm sorry I reported your friend. I didn't know he was a long-time
11
friend.
years after the end of the First World War. Germany had been a democracy for 10 years.
Okay, you got cut off again.
But now its enemies were circling.
No, I said I'm sorry I reported your friend. I didn't know he was a long-time friend.
It doesn't matter. That was unacceptable behavior.
We have seen that this new German parliamentary and party system is hypocritical and socially corrupt.
Dova told me what he did, so that's unacceptable. And I don't know why he was doing that, and it's just not right. Not tolerable. Not trying to be a noob about it, but that was newbie behavior. It's not acceptable.
I'm with you. I wouldn't say I hate, but I just definitely dislike modders.
Representative of the people, a strong leader, a strong single party. That's what we're seeing again today. The populist or radical right is saying, we are the true people. We represent the people. Everyone else is being manipulated and is acting against the people's interests.
The major parties have been preying on the state and turned the government of our nation and people into an arena for ideological experiments. The AFD is our country's last chance to evolve in the right direction. Otherwise, we must prepare.
The hell was that?
Good lord.
Andreas Kalbitz is leader of the AFD in Brandenburg and has
Dude, there's some serious lag going on in this big old truck. Oh my gosh. Not the yellow one, the big old gray one that's in second right now.
Many in the Weimar Republic also
Oh, car, just go. Just go, car. Stop. Oh, I gotta drive with
professional
my
associations, sports clubs, and political parties all expected the post-war generation to grab the reins and shape the country's future. By the time the Nazis had seized power, it was not just the Hitler Youth who had been converted. Many young people believed that democracy had become obsolete, tarnished by the older generation that had led Germany into the First World War. Ideas of race and ethnicity had become the hallmark of national unity. The individual was nothing, the people everything. Their bond to blood and soil was to be purged of alien elements, leaving behind only the pure body of the people.
There could be no contradictions within the supposedly biologically pure national community.
Good lord.
It couldn't countenance any
Unacceptable new. Oh my god. Drive.
competing interests had to be quashed. All of these things that we now accept as part of modern mass society were rejected as fundamentally hostile.
Is that a fucking
Oh
raptor?
gosh. I'm gonna kick my own ass.
By 1924,
I fucking want that car.
drawing on these ideas. The
Oh my
ethnic nation
god.
is the source of political action.
Get your butt in gear.
Is
Fourth
obligated to
place.
act in the national
Fourth place, my butt.
Their actions must be guided only by the desire to preserve and promote the ethnic lifeway of our people.
The traditions of the German fraternities also draw on the
Ah, fuck.
anti-Semitic ideologies of the 1920s and 30s. Then as now, fraternities serve as a breeding ground for radical right-wing parties and think tanks, and for the whole right-wing apparatus.
The German fraternities are still the elite schools of Germany's extreme right. Their traditions are unchanged. But how much of this ethno-nationalist ideology still remains? We meet fraternity spokesman Philip Stein in Holland.
What I want is for peoples and populations to preserve their relative homogeneity, their traditions.
How's that different from Nazi racial?
Why am I? Oh my god, I'm not using the brake on these corners.
Racial theory is based on something very different. Ethnicity doesn't mean everyone is blonde, everyone has beautiful straight teeth, or a particular shape of skull. A people is made up of a variety of qualities that have evolved organically over the centuries.
I'm asking about this tradition of racial theory because it also involved the sphere of intermingling.
Well, as I've explained, kinship and identity, along with language and religious confession, are some of the things that define a nation. And of course, kinship and identity includes some things that have nothing to do with racial theory, but just with forms of expression, with human forms. Like what? Well, take a look around. It's pretty easy for me to see that you're a German or European. So it's pretty clear that certain physical characteristics define a people. Well, at least most of what I would call a people. That's actually a pretty ordinary fact.
But that's a racist or racial point of view.
Why racial? I don't want to somehow define people by the shape of their skulls or the kind of crazy stuff that the National Socialists propagated. It just goes without saying that certain characteristics are what define the identity of a people.
So where are these ideas coming from?
Grab my tail if you can, buddy.
This existential racist mode of thought has been part of
Oh, dude. Okay, dude, you're right behind me. Grab my tail.
It's constantly finding
There you go.
language and new terminology for its ideas.
There you go. Oh crap. Here, come back, come back, come on.
They want society to be homogeneous along ethnic lines, to change the
don't
things
worry,
that
you
define
racist.
Germany as a state.
There we go. Okay, now you should drive it.
Citizens are not deceived as Germans through the prism of ethno-nationalism. That's what they want.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That was painful.
I bumped into the wall.
Lived in the Lithuanian capital of
Yes, I saw that.
In 1941,
Have you tried racing it in first person?
the German army occupied the city. Her mother
Nope,
hid her,
I will
but
do
then she and her
terribly.
parents were rounded up and sent to the city's Jewish ghetto.
You actually
One day
might
her
find
father
it
was
easier
taken away
racing in
and
first
shot.
person.
Not long afterwards,
Much easier
Tamar and her
easier
mother
to
were put on
control
a
too.
train to a death camp.
Ooh,
Along the way,
for
the
the
train
most
made
part
a brief
anyways.
stop.
This race is
Her mother saw
notoriously.
a chance to escape. As if by a
Oh,
miracle,
damn hella.
they got away unnoticed and went underground for years and survived. Tamar Dreyfus has been living in Cologne for many
Notoriously.
years. Today she feels that she's witnessing
Difficult.
a revival of the past, a resurgent racism and hostility towards immigrants.
That's a really hard
nourished
race.
by
I
the very
cannot.
same ideology.
I know I can learn it, but it's. I made so many mistakes.
Okay.
I can't even believe I'm in second.
I have to
third
go
place.
in
My
a boat.
fate is probably to stay here and do what I do. I mean, this is like a drop of water on a hot stone. But many drops can make stone melt, and I hope I've collected a lot of drops in my time.
I can't believe how hard that race was.
Today, nationalism has returned
Okay,
to
I'm
Germany's
gonna go
streets
through,
under the
gonna place
guise of a
go.
right-wing protest movement. Fears of a nation under threat, of national decline, are being whipped up to justify the anger.
The smell of decay from a dying democracy is wafting through the country. In this situation, dear friends, and I say this as a citizen loyal to the state, our duty is not to remain calm.
Oh, you gotta go, Zero? Okay.
Courage, anger, defiance, and civil disobedience.
No, I'm not going. I'm racing all day because of this triple money and triple RP.
Okay, are you gonna be on around lunchtime? Pacific Standard Time?
Pacific Standard Time, lunchtime. What is that, like 3 o'clock Central? Probably.
Yeah, because it goes Pacific, Mountain, Central, Eastern, doesn't it?
Regard liberal democracy as a process of decline and decay.
Probably. I may end up taking a nap around that time. I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta take a nap now. I had 4 hours Friday night.
In the
Friday
Weimar
morning.
Republic,
Saturday morning.
monarchists and supporters of a one-party system.
And Sunday's supposed to be my cleaning day, but I've been kind of ruining my play by cleaning
The Social
and worrying
Democrats,
about
with their
cleaning.
ideas of liberalism, were especially hated. The communists were agitating from the left.
I need to go out and do some Uber Eats.
Increasingly the
Try to
Nazi
make some
Party
money.
from the right.
Oh, you do delivery? That's awesome, dude.
And political parties.
No, I've never done it before. That's why I'm procrastinating.
Oh,
It's gonna
okay.
be weird. It's gonna be weird just cutting on the app and going into a restaurant and picking up food for the first time.
Yeah, and then you're not getting it for yourself, too.
I know, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, you're all well educated on all the scams that people pull to
Today, the
rip you off.
AFD is trying to claim the mantle of
No,
safety.
not really.
They see the government and other political
Okay.
parties as enemies of the people.
Yeah, might be a good idea, just that you're aware things don't get past you. People are
Yeah,
freaking noobs, man.
I'm a YouTube it to figure out.
Dear friends,
I didn't even think of that. Hopefully it's rare.
She wants to
Oh,
make
there's
the
all
great
kinds of scams
replacement
people do,
irreversible.
dude.
Don't ask
I
me
was
what her
reading on
motives
some,
are.
but I can't even
For
think of them
some
because I'm
reason,
so
she
tired.
has something against the German people.
I can, if I think about it later, because my memory being what it is, it's a sieve.
They want to create a different
I'll
country, a country without immigrant families,
tell you about
a country without
my
a
local
liberal
map.
culture and a cosmopolitan globalized economy. They're essentially
Gotcha.
talking about a form
Yeah, I
of
really.
national socialism.
Yeah, I'm gonna
That's
Google it. I didn't even think of it.
In the German parliament, the Bundestag, the AFD serves as a catch-all for the far right. It survives by whipping up discontent and anger. Many AFD voters have lost faith in the state and political system. Only 1 to 4% of voters from
Okay, I'll
the
try the
mainstream
Banshee on
established
this one,
parties
but
say they're dissatisfied
tells me
with
my
democracy
Banshee is
in
the
Germany.
best one, but
But among left-wing
doesn't have
voters,
good
that figure is
traction like the
31%.
Krieger does.
Among AFD voters,
And it's
41%.
less breaking than the Krieger.
This dissatisfaction with
What-
the
what
democratic
card did you
system,
get, dude?
paired with ethno-nationalism, has
Oh, I just
also
picked a
drawn
Turismo,
millions
which
of
was a bad idea.
many of whom share these views.
My Turismo is fully spec'd out though.
Even before the AFD was founded, a certain segment in German society held much more conservative, not to say right-wing and even racist views, than were reflected in Angela Merkel's Christian Democratic Party. But there was no one on the stage who said this openly, or with an air of credibility and legitimacy. The AFD has succeeded in doing just that. And now, racist values and worldviews are not just being thought, but openly expressed.
Hey, Zero!
Extremist beliefs also exist in the center of society that we like to think of as a kind of bastion, line of defense. We tend to think of right-wing extremism as taking place on the political fringe, something that you can get back under control because it's just an isolated minority. But that's not really true. These attitudes are widespread. You'll find them in many segments of society.
Right-wing extremism can persist over generations. This is shown by a study conducted by the University of Munich, which examined Rhineland-Palatinate and Baden-Württemberg, two federal states where immigration has been less of a factor. They found that areas that voted for the Nazis in 1933, shown here in red, gave a larger share of their vote to the
I'm in first place with the Turismo.
Parliamentary elections.
Right on, dude. Keep it up.
Oh no, that was second place.
That's okay. You're in second with the Turismo. That's freaking awesome. I'm in third with the Banshee. That's amazing. Considering how flippy dippy frisbee like this vehicle is.
Passed down in families and communities.
Okay, I'm right behind you.
The new far right and the AFD cut their teeth on the streets. This is where they recruit their followers. Just like the Nazis in the Weimar Republic. At first, the Nazis were an irrelevant fringe movement, but they were determined to become a visible force and to grow.
Der Nationalsozialismus ist keine Partei im alltäglichen Sinne dieses Wortes. Er ist eine Bewegung, die sich zum Ziele gesetzt hat, das ganze deutsche Volk in all seinen Ständen
Whoa!
Kenntnissen zu umspannen.
Dude, did I whack you?
To avoid betraying its stated mission, the AFD has to remain a movement. In other words,
Nah, you
it always
didn't.
has to be visible on the streets.
On my screen,
Are you
can
sure?
actually, yeah, I'm sure. You can actually see it on my stream. You didn't hit me at all.
Okay, good. Because that was freaking holy heck, pardon my language. Sorry for yelling in your ear, but I flew and it looked like I was just gonna land right on you and just mess you up so bad. I was trying to angle away. It wasn't working very good. This car is like a flippy brick.
No, it was probably just lag or something.
Street brawls became the order of the day. The radicals set out
Did you
to
hit me on your
destabilize the
screen?
state and demonstrate its powerlessness.
No, I came, well, I couldn't tell because I'm in first person.
Their first anti-Semitic attacks, hunting down Jews
Oh, I
on
got you.
Berlin's main shopping boulevards.
So, it looked like I smashed up metal, but I couldn't tell if it was my metal or your metal. You know how it flies up when you hit stuff?
Attacks on journalists.
I wasn't too sure if I was hitting you or the edge of the wall.
Racism was openly
I'm curious to see who he's calling the cheater.
into violence.
This tendency towards violence isn't just an abstract idea, it's being acted upon. I think we lost sight of the fact that we've had a militant subculture with an affinity for terrorism in this scene for a long time. They've been waiting in the wings for the right moment to put their violence into action on the streets.
The far left shares those tendencies, as was on evidence at the G20 summit in Hamburg 2 years ago. They also resorted to violence. But there is a crucial difference.
The radical left isn't trying to overthrow democracy.
Yeah,
but to
he already
overthrow
ran away.
capitalism. The radical
He is
right
not
aims
impressed.
to do
Maybe
away
somebody
with
in the
democracy
group
and
is
human rights. This difference
whacking
is
back
also
there.
apparent in their behavior on the streets. As a rule,
I know when I get to rank 666, people are gonna be thinking I'm a modder because of the 666. Just like when I was 420.
Also tends to hunt down minorities and attack people, not objects.
Yep. 420 went so short for me, it was disappointing. It was wonderful while it happened, but it was disappointing.
But they claim to represent a silent majority. They openly express racial ideologies and notions of ethnic purity.
I really wish you could reset your rank, and maybe they just change the color of it, like into bronze. You go back to 0, but now you're bronze.
Of course, the Great Migration Crisis that
you
started
reset it
in
again, and then you go back to gold or something, but at 0.
Right-wing ideas or whatever. I don't think anyone would deny that. There was a moment when these opinions were able to gain momentum.
when what people were willing to say out loud really expanded. You can talk about things now that were more difficult a few
Sorry,
years
dude.
ago.
If you said anything, I was AFK from screen for a second.
The limits of what can be said openly and in public without immediate sanction have shifted substantially in Germany over the last few years. I think everyone agrees on that.
I got Eye of the Tiger, so
It's worrying that
found
radical
it in a
slogans,
playlist. I didn't know
including
I
a
had.
kind of
Well, I knew I had
rhetorical
it.
violence,
But
are
no, I
now
had it
not
in
just
there.
limited to social media, where it's
I'm
long
gonna
been
play
a
it for
real
this
problem.
race.
Now it's left the digital world and gone analog.
See how
into
we
the
do.
public sphere.
Far-right groups such as Pegida and the Identitarian movement are moving onto Germany's streets.
Look like everyone left. Okay, there's another one.
Oh, your host. Okay, good. Yeah, just toggle matchmaking back and forth, and you can keep us sitting here as long as you want.
On the far right, they want to draw young people.
Eventually, we'll get a flood of people.
The Identitarians are skilled
Race
at
will let
attracting
out.
attention. Like at
I
this
did not even know
protest
that.
at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, and their campaign on the French Alps for a Mediterranean mission.
You didn't know what?
Holy crap. That I can stay in the lobby for forever.
Oh, okay.
Has mounted campaigns in Austria,
Well, you can.
Germany, and across Europe, proclaiming the supposed downfall of society. He also plays down the crimes committed by the Nazis, claiming that traditional democratic politicians have become mired in what he calls a cult of guilt. For years, this elite has been searching for a sword to fall onto. Now they've found one, the migration crisis. This is a society, a generation of death and voluntary liquidation. The Identitarians want to be a force of life. So we say this to that elite. You're welcome to sacrifice yourselves, to destroy yourselves with your cult of guilt. That's your right. But you don't have the right to drag the rest of us into this. The Identitarian movement is being monitored as an extremist organization by Germany's security services. The Identitarians say they want to protect the purity of supposedly homogenous ethnic groups. The Great Replacement is its unifying narrative.
You also know lots of times when you're playing in missions and other stuff, you can get your bike or your car or your truck or whatever from interaction menu vehicles. You can also sometimes get your planes from there too.
The survival of our people and the whole of
Oh yeah, I just found that out. Yeah, I just found that one out.
The idea that the population will be supplanted
like a couple weeks ago.
Something like a great replacement, as
Good.
the new right calls it, is widespread.
I like sharing information.
New radical right-wing ideology.
Yeah, there's a lot that I don't know about this game.
The globalization of the population.
Oh, yeah, me too. Because I don't read about it, I just play it, right? So there's other people. I've known people. There's two people I know of. One I used to associate with, one I associate with now. I have them on my list. And they just know the game so good. Actually three. But yeah, and they tell me little facts. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that.
By now, everyone should have
Yeah,
realized
there's a lot
that
we
anyone
don't
who
know.
doesn't follow the green eco-mainstream or who's not interested
One
in
thing I do
immigration
know is that it
is immediately
never
branded
should have been
Nazi.
sold to Take-Two.
They're trying
Ever.
to marginalize us. The Great Replacement. I've seen that a lot in your literature. What is it? The Great Replacement is when the majority, the native population, is displaced and replaced by others. When a population's ethnic composition is upended. So if we take Germany as a concrete example, then the Great Replacement
I'm gonna
means that
start.
people born and bred in Frankfurt would no longer be the majority in their own city. And who decides who's German and who isn't? It's not a decision. There is no decision, and no authority can make one. It's a process. But you have decided who's German and who
You just
isn't.
do this one?
And Frankfurt has lots of immigrants. You say no.
I'm not complaining.
And we don't
I wasn't paying attention to what we played.
Yes, we don't want
Yeah.
Germans to become a
Same
minority
here.
in their own
It's
country.
like race.
So people
Okay,
who
gotta
speak
get the
Spanish
music on.
from somewhere else aren't Germans? Sorry, what? People with a migration background aren't Germans? In a way, it depends on exactly where they came from and your definition of what is a German. Yes.
Okay.
But the vast majority of
Yeah,
people
this is
with
what we
migrant
just did.
backgrounds in Germany are Germans. They're German citizens. But can a piece of paper be the final word in defining who's a German and who isn't?
What they're saying violates our concept of citizenship and the values of our constitution. When they say that people are not German because of their heritage, that's a modern form of racism. A German is a person who's a German citizen, and that's what the new right is unwilling to accept.
The ideology of the Great Replacement unites right-wing extremists around the world. On March 15, 2019, in Christchurch, New Zealand, a right-wing extremist shot dead 50 people who were praying in 2 mosques. The killer filmed his rampage and streamed it live on the internet, harvesting clicks and likes from right-wing extremists. Before the attack, Brent and Terrence wrote a manifesto claiming that the white race in Western countries was being replaced because of its lower birth rate. It was titled The Great Replacement.
That was cool to watch you
the
pass
same
by.
ideology that underlies the identitarian movement. And there was also a direct connection to Martin Zellner, mouthpiece of the identitarians. Martin Zellner was forced to admit that Terrence had donated 1,500 euros to his private account a year before the attack.
The terrorists' donation to the identitarian movement demonstrates ideological sympathy or proximity.
Dude, that was so cool to watch your cargo flying through the sky with the moon up there.
This is a very clear indication.
There's you on the left and the moon on the right. If you get a chance, you can put that into the editor on the GTA, the Rockstar editor, and watch it from the behind angle and see what I saw.
Several far-right activists are holding a meeting here. We're allowed inside, but aren't allowed
I'll
to
check
ask
it
any
out.
questions. Alex Malenki says
Yeah, it
the
looks
killer's
sweet.
donation to Martin Zellner was no big deal. This whole thing is
Okay,
a
I'm
farce.
using the wrong brake. Bloody hell.
It could happen
Driving
to
like a
anyone.
noobsicle.
Tomorrow, someone could throw 10 euros into your mailbox. Just saying. Was this just a random donation, unsolicited and unwanted? It turns out that Zellner replied to Brent and Terrence's email. I want to thank you personally for your incredible donation. This is my personal email address. If you want, you can contact me here. Martin Zellner continues to paint himself as the victim. But he doesn't seem to reject violence in principle, only for strategic reasons.
Non-violence in activism does not mean being defenseless. In my opinion,
I don't know how to use
willingness to fight.
the editor, but I need to learn.
For metapolitical and strategic reasons. We know it's better and more effective.
So avoiding violence may only be a temporary tactic. An event attended by numerous AFD officials. The speakers openly professed the doctrine of the Great Replacement.
Okay, what don't you know how to use?
The federal government
I cut you off again.
The editor.
Can keep bearing children and complete
GTA.
Wait, it cut you off. It cut you off. You
Rockstar.
said that there's something you said you didn't like to use, and then it cut you off.
No, I mean I need to learn how to use the editor. I don't know how to use the editor because I've never
Oh, okay,
used it
I
before.
think they kind of explain it as you go along.
The declining birth rate.
Huh.
From what I saw, I didn't go
is
deep
posing a
into it, so,
fundamental
and I don't
threat to
remember.
their
It's quite some time.
existence.
Freaking awesome though, dude. But if you film from a certain camera angle, you can't look at it from different angles. I don't remember which one it is.
During the Weimar Republic. Hitler propagated his racial ideology early on, directing it against anyone he saw as alien to the German nation. But at that time, many people didn't see the danger in it.
Eine gläubige Gemeinschaft von Menschen ist erstanden, die entschlossen ist, den Kampf für die Erhaltung unserer Rasse aufzunehmen. Die Nationalsozialisten marschieren daher auch in jede Wahl hinein mit dem einzigen Bekenntnis, am nächsten Tage die Arbeit wieder erneut aufzunehmen für die innere Reorganisation unseres Volkskörpers.
In Nazi ideology, this supposed body of the nation was made up only of what they called Aryan Germans. Jews didn't belong, even if their families had been in Germany for generations.
Oh, did you make it no contact again?
If a Muslim in this country doesn't like our no, and if a Muslim in this country does not want to accept our no, then, dear friends, he is free to roll up his prayer rug, clamp it under his arm, and leave our country.
Both then and now, the main enemy under this ideology are Jews, who are perceived as powerful, as infiltrators.
Hey, where's that no contact setting at?
But migrants, Muslims,
I think if you haven't set it yet, there's nothing you can do. It's at the top of the first setup screen, like slipstream.
My bad. I don't know if
So
I
if you've
cut
gone
it off or
past
not.
it, you can't go back and reset it up.
Of the same house
It'll
in
just
Halle,
accept
where the
where you're at.
identitarian movement has its bar.
I actually prefer it to be no contact.
If 2, 3, or 4 million people immigrate and live in Germany for many, many decades, then of course a shift in the social majorities will at some point become a possibility. Just take a look at demographic statistics. You don't have to be right or left wing. It's simply a fact. The demographic trend here in Germany is basically happening to the detriment of the majority population. So the descendants of people who live here now, no matter how long they live here, will always be immigrants and not Germans? They're citizens, but not part of our people.
The trick behind this is to present demographic change as a larger threat. That's then dressed up in racist garb. There's no way to come up with the idea of a great replacement unless you're thinking in terms of ethnicity and employing racist categories.
Sultan. The fucking Sultan ain't about to do shit. That Turismo is...
For them, being a migrant or not is nothing special. Who's only German? 3? And who isn't? Everybody else. They don't see that as a problem. To the contrary.
We all came from somewhere else, settled here, and then built up our country.
Or should I cut ketchup off? I mean, slipstream.
None of us are the real
Holy shit, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. That was a multi-car accident caused by one noob. No offense to the noob. Not meaning to insult them by calling them a noob. Oops, sorry, darling. Bump this guy's butt.
Austria, far-right parties have gained an ever larger following in recent years. In May 2019, Heinz-Christian Strache had to step down as vice chancellor and leader of the right-wing populist Freedom Party after a scandal that
It's like, oh, sorry, darling, you're in the orange car. I just whacked your butt. Sorry.
the independence of the media.
And then you whacked my butt.
In Hungary, this process
At least I think that's you.
The right-wing
Is that you?
populist Fidesz party under Viktor Orban
You talking to me? Nope.
abolished the free press.
Okay.
Stations with its own people and closed down entire
Good.
editorial offices.
Feel a little bit less guilty.
Yeah, my Krieger is black. Like matte black.
Oh, okay.
The far-right Lega Nord, led by anti-immigrant firebrand Matteo Salvini, have a powerful influence on policy. Their isolationist policies are one reason why thousands of refugees have drowned in the Mediterranean. The AFD on the campaign.
Oh, they recovered. Good recovery, dude.
Met with other European far-right leaders.
Dude did not die and have to restart. Oh my god, that was amazing.
The right is on the rise throughout Europe.
Oh, is that you, darling? You just whacked me?
European countries,
No, that's not
can
you.
see the
Okay,
far
good.
right is quickly gaining ground in many of them. In some, right-wing extremists are now even part of government coalitions at the national level.
I haven't looked at the wall yet to see.
Dude, this orange car can suck it.
Right-wing populist and far-right parties played very little role in Europe, only reaching the 10% threshold in a few countries at the turn of the millennium. But in 2019, far-right parties have become a force to be reckoned with. In some countries, they've even been part of the government. A similar development took place after the First World War,
what a turn. What
which
a
led to the
turn.
emergence of a number of democracies in Europe. 20 years later, most of them had reverted to authoritarian systems or dictatorships. The Weimar Republic resisted this tendency, but the Nazis were biding their time, waiting for a chance to overthrow democracy and establish a totalitarian
God, the orange
regime.
keeps on bashing.
For a while, the economy was on the upswing, inflation was falling, and unemployment was lower than it had been in years.
Cold
Assault
something.
Assaulting is about to beat me. That is
Until then, the Nazis had been a fringe party. Then unemployment exploded, bringing with it widespread poverty. Voters flocked to the Nazis. With little social security, many Germans lost their homes and went hungry. The Nazis seized on this widespread discontent and won the protest vote. From 1924 to 1933, the Nazis had made some significant electoral gains, but these did not come at the expense of the other political parties. Instead, voter turnout was rising rapidly, and it appears that many people who marked their ballot for the Nazis had previously been non-voters.
The NSDAP, the Nazi party, was what they called a people's party, a party of protest. It was the only party that was effective across the Weimar Republic. The AfD is also a mixture of socially established voters from the center who drifted to the right, and new voters, protest voters, who see it as a vehicle to express their dissatisfaction.
And we will keep this revolution going until politics in this country has been reversed by 180 degrees.
Ah!
The AfD also capitalizes on protest.
Oh my good lord.
It attracts people who didn't vote before. Almost a quarter of AfD supporters were previously non-voters. There's a clear parallel to the former Nazi party.
This also implies that not all Nazi voters
Oh, why do I keep on whacking the walls?
suddenly become convinced racists and anti-Semites and National Socialists. The Nazis were harvesting the protest
I'm
vote.
seriously considering opening up my new controller. Because lately I've been having these weird whacks to the left and right. Yeah, Zero! Third place! Good job, dude!
Unemployment in Germany is low, and the economy seemingly
I got really lucky.
but the danger is still there.
They had an
German
accident. It was
society
like
is
a
becoming
2-car
increasingly
accident.
fragmented.
We're not a society that's getting poorer, we're a society that's getting richer.
Hey, what type of controller? Is it another Logitech or?
But the upper 60% in our society keep getting richer, while the lower 40% haven't made any gains in the last 15 years. And that's a problem. Even with the expansion of opportunity, social inequality has grown.
This 40% is 32 million people in Germany, people who've seen no economic gains, or who have even lost ground. This state of affairs has become a threat to social stability. What would happen in the event of a new global economic crisis? If Germany experienced runaway inflation and mass unemployment?
The new radical right is pursuing a policy of ratcheting up social tensions. They want to push it to the point where tensions will erupt and destroy liberal democracy.
I have the fastest lap, by the way.
Democracy to a brutal dictatorship
Yes!
in just
Out of everybody?
14 years.
Yep.
Right on.
That we're very gradually seeing a return to those things. Social polarization, right-wing extremism, the rise of an anti-democratic party, the rise of right-wing violence, a state and a government that no longer seem to be able to cope with this situation. All of those elements existed in the Weimar Republic. We're not repeating that history, but we must draw on our knowledge of what happened to the Weimar Republic to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Hey, Infinite, do you got a sports classic?
Свобода слова, свобода совести, свобода средств массовой информации, права собственности. Эти основополагающие элементы цивилизованного общества будут надежно защищены государством.
Excuse me.
С Новым годом вас! С Новым веком!
Okay.
My name is Polina, and I was born on December 31st, 1999 in the Krasnoyarsk region.
I got the Halloween card I used.
I like the fact that I was born on a special day.
It's actually a truck, or a non-custom truck that looks really good.
Power for 18 years. I went to school, he was there. I finished school, he was there. He's been there an eternity.
I actually got my Turismo. I really think I should have cut off custom cars for this.
You got cut off again, if you can hear me.
No, I said I think I should have cut off custom cars for this one.
To believe that we're not just a leftover, but a worthy successor to the Soviet
Yeah,
Union.
same here.
A worthy successor to the Russian Empire. A worthy representative of the Russian spirit, which has always distinguished our nation from other nations. My name is Andrei Nazarov. I'm a student at the Faculty of Journalism at the Moscow Polytechnic University.
Good lord. Double good lord.
My name is Camilla. I'm in the
And I'm promptly in the back.
I'm interested in politics and activism.
Should be doing this in first person, but I don't want to whack people.
Everything has been destroyed.
This thing acts more like a heavy van in first person, so it's less bumpy around. But I don't want to whack anyone.
Everyone calls them that because they're a gang of crooks who have taken power. They divide the money up however they want. They're involved in killings. They're a criminal organization who use threats, murder, and forgery to companies and put people in prison.
I'm really bad in first person.
They are real criminals.
Really? Just in the races or just driving in general?
Just in the races.
Events take place here that haven't been
Okay.
officially approved.
Yeah, it takes a long time to get used to them so that you can drive in first person, you know?
Known from his revelations about corruption in Russia. Last time it was a demonstration against the raising of the retirement age. I went with my friends.
I need to focus.
We pushed forward towards the police, taking the barriers with us. We were in the second row. There was a terrible commotion. There was a brutal fight with the police. Of course, I was really afraid. I don't know if I'll do it again, if I'll have the courage to.
Our society is very conservative. We still live with many patterns left over from the Soviet era. My mother builds satellites. My father recycles atom bombs. There are 2 factories in our city. In one they build satellites, in the other they recycle the insides of atom bombs.
По-моему, утилизируют начинку от атомных бомб. Я не специально взяла его, он просто всегда у меня почему-то с собой в рюкзаке.
I didn't bring it with me especially. It's always in my backpack.
Oh my god, why are you being newbie? Didn't get that badly damaged.
My hometown is fenced around with barbed wire.
There we go.
I've often crawled through it where there were holes. The last time the police caught me.
Полицейские поймали.
There are checkpoints at the entrances. It's not a city. It's what
Good morning, dude.
closed autonomous.
Are you awake yet?
And it's all surrounded by a barbed wire fence.
Okay. Do you want me to set an alarm for you? Okay.
My name is Taya. I'm 18 years old, born on
How about I
December
put on
31st,
something nice and sweet for you?
1999.
My name is Egor, also born on December 31st, 1999. We're twins.
Our generation doesn't know how life could be any different. We've lived our entire lives under Putin. It's hard when you have nothing to compare it with.
What else can we do? Either protest or emigrate.
Yes, exactly.
I don't feel much like living in this country.
Me either.
At least under Putin.
With his followers, he's built up a system of corruption. He's been sitting up there so long, there's not much you can change. We don't have a democracy. We have a monarchy.
The Turismo is a really good sports classic car.
К России стали относиться с большим доверием и уважением в мире. Нас стали лучше понимать. Оказалось очевидным, что последовательная борьба России с террором продиктована не только нашими национальными интересами, но и его глобальной опасностью.
Одна из главнейших целей в моей жизни — это даже не цель, а мечта.
An important goal in my life, it's actually a dream of mine, is not to remain just some insignificant person in history, but to be remembered. There are lots of different routes. Just see one and take it. Like Napoleon said, it is better not to live than to leave behind no legacy. You don't have to be like Hitler and Napoleon, who left the world in a bloodbath.
В Правовый океан весь мир нужно.
You should be like Vladimir Vladimirovich, who fights for peace and is prepared to do everything to achieve it. He says, we'll find them at the airport or wherever and kill them. We will totally annihilate evil.
Мне кажется, вот этот вот характер, он помог президенту.
His character has helped the president to make it possible for Russia not only to get up off its knees, but to gather courage.
And he's shown there is an opposing pole, which can determine the conditions for maintaining the world order.
I don't like anything in my hometown. I don't see anything that makes me feel good about it.
Что мне дни, что мне эти минуты, возьмите себе или отдайте кому-то вечности. Пожалуй, не так уж и много, если есть назад хотя бы одна дорога. Стань не вновь моими рваными джинсами без тебя. Я не понимаю ее прозу, я забью на все свои прежние принципы. Ветер, ночь и пистолеты и розы. Чем я отличаюсь от своих родителей?
What makes me different from my parents? I don't know. I believe the most important thing is freedom of thought. My parents lived in a time when they were told what to think. They try to bring everyone down to the same level.
Какая-то была уравниловка, все одинаковые, под один горшок.
You're wrong there, Paulina. You're right, we were told what to think and say. But there were kitchens where people sat and thought about things and discussed everything.
Да, но ты все еще...
Yes, but you still believe that women have no place in politics and that homosexuals are sick and need to be healed.
Что такое? Ну, то есть... Ну, у меня...
I don't have those things.
Родители...
My parents watch the news on television and not on the internet. They don't have the same access to freedom of opinion that I have because they're not interested in that.
Например, я сейчас умею, ну, просто потому что это не входит в их зону интересов.
It's true. In those days, I didn't know any other opinions in our closed city. I was happy to have been born in the Soviet Union, to belong to the pioneers, to live in such a good town.
Да. И что?
We live with a secure feeling about the future.
I go to an English high school. My favorite subjects are English and German. I want to be a translator. It's a profession you can pursue in different directions. I've been to Austria, once to France, and to Finland as well. For me, the most interesting trip was to Austria. We had an exchange program at school. The kids our age seem to be more grown up there. That's because of the mentality. You can't say that about us. I felt they were more responsible than us.
I finished 9th grade and went to a vocational school. I'm training to be a cook. The course takes 3 years.
You better fucking learn how to fucking drive.
I don't feel like doing it, but I'll have to. When I leave the army, I'll have to see what exactly I do then.
We cut the onions lengthwise. Cut them lengthwise. Stop.
Okay.
This is how we cut them.
I'm not going to school at the moment. I've started having lessons at home. Over the years, I've had a lot of stressful situations at school. Even at the end, there was a conflict with my schoolmates. For some years now, I've been bullied at school. But in some ways, it's my own fault.
Ну, как говорится...
First, I worked in the army as a volunteer.
Вот.
Not everybody was okay with that.
Сначала я была волонтеркой.
Then some didn't like the photos I posted.
Я выкладывала откровенные фотки.
Our last argument was ridiculous.
Вот. И последний...
We fell out over the use of gender-specific job titles.
Поссорились из-за феминитива. Я натыкаюсь на прав.
I'm being bullied because I'm the bullyable type.
Человек. У нас общество такое. Общество затравленных.
Our society is a nation of harassed and insecure people.
Я думаю...
That's a historical development from the Soviet era after all that repression.
После всех репрессий...
The people were exterminated, shot, left to starve.
Урезали, расстреливали.
And after that, we all became so insecure.
После этого мы были...
We're afraid to say anything. Respect neither ourselves nor others.
Не уважаем самое главное себя. Себя и других.
Fuck. Stupid fuck.
What is our research about? Trying to understand what prevents our journalists from establishing an information policy that creates an intellectual atmosphere which promotes innovation. Not because Putin demands innovation. Incidentally, Putin is in this regard very pessimistic. Nazirov, why do we have to become an innovative society?
Потому что, во-первых,
Many states are already post-industrial societies, and unfortunately, people regard Russia as backward in this respect, which I don't agree with.
я не отсталая в этом плане. А уничтожение государства такого мощного.
A mighty state like Russia could be destroyed if the young generation aren't interested in the development of the country.
Развитие своей страны. Тогда
It's ruined if its history is destroyed. If the young generation have the wrong ideals and views, which to some extent we see around us today.
что мы видим в некотором смысле,
It's good you see that.
Yes.
Самый главный враг наших либералов.
The main enemy of our liberals are the Americans. America only wants one thing, that we die, simply bite the dust and fall apart into 20 separate countries. Or even better, 50 countries, so that all that's left of Russia is a geographical name. I don't want that. And I don't want you to want it either.
I don't want that.
Nothing good will come of it. You can see that from the situation with Georgia and Ukraine, where you have fascists, nationalists, and idiots running around with guns. Understood, Nazirov?
Меня много что интересует.
I'm interested in lots of things. Journalism, political activism, art.
Искусство. Это
That's a poster for the memorial march for Nemtsov, the opposition leader who was murdered 4 years ago in front of the Kremlin.
назад напротив Кремля. У меня была идея, что
I had the idea of comparing my childhood with the childhoods of my grandmother and my mother.
моей мамы. Я просто
My grandmother's childhood fell in the time of what's called the Thaw. That was a period of time after the death of Stalin, when Khrushchev came to power and repression gave way to a milder regime. Stalin's personality cult was debunked. Life became easier.
развенчался культ Сталина, и, в общем, жизнь стала повеселее.
My mother's childhood fell in the time of the perestroika in the 90s. That means democracy, freedom. I asked her what she had felt in those days. She said the air smelled of freedom. My childhood is in a lull, a political lull. Nothing is clear at the international level either. No prospects. Here is the list of events that occurred in my childhood. Terrorist attacks, political repression, the murder of homosexuals in Chechnya. I believe our government acted wrongly in many cases. In my opinion, Putin is also behind the murder of Nemtsov. The killers and the one who gave the order can be traced back to Chechnya. It's highly likely that there was a secret order from Putin. For me, that's what the Putin regime is like.
Мы предприняли серьезные шаги, направленные на повышение эффективности власти, ее открытости обществу и ответственности перед ним. Укрепился экономический, оборонный потенциал, возросли возможности нашей страны.
They chanted, "Putin is a thief." I went to the Navalny demo on Putin's birthday. That's me with my friend. I'm against Putin's policies. That was the reason. It was my first demonstration. I wanted to experience the atmosphere.
Adios.
At school, they forbid us to attend such events. Even when you're 18 and want to defend your rights as a citizen. But they want Putin to be president. If you like Navalny, you want to go to the demo to help.
Yikes! This car is too fast.
Saying that you won't attend such rallies.
They make this track before these cars came out. The fuck was that? Fuck, I gotta remember that shit.
Call me.
Don't expect me to call.
Oh, I'm so sorry. What?
I didn't move to Moscow only for the great educational opportunities here. The best thing about being here is that nobody cares about me. No one interferes in my life.
Всем плевать, и никто не лезет в жизнь.
Do you think we need the pump?
You need a round glass flask.
I'm a student at the first medical university. The subject is called medical biochemistry. My degree certificate will say physician for biochemistry.
Oof.
I plan to go into the sciences. That's where I see my fulfillment.
общежитие мне оплачивают родители.
My parents pay for the student dormitory. I share this with 2 other students. The bed is my entire living space. The table next to it serves as a shelf.
Заменяет мне полку.
The suitcase on the floor takes the place of a bookcase. It's jam-packed full of books that I can't store anywhere else.
Да, я на кровати сплю.
I sleep in bed, drink in bed, study.
Okay, alright,
I do everything
okay.
in these 2 square meters.
Вот здесь. Вот на таких квадратных метрах. Нормально. В России очень много.
In Russia, there are many who are disadvantaged. Women's interests aren't respected. Rights of homosexuals aren't framed.
Again.
Of course, I want to contribute to ending discrimination
Again.
so that everyone has equal rights and we can all live in one big utopia.
Большой-большой дом. Я не встану.
But I'm not going to stand around here holding a rainbow flag because I know I'd be beaten to death.
Здесь просто убьют. И все.
Oh, what a bad race.
Мы не только восстановили территориальную целостность России, но и вновь почувствовали себя единым народом. И все эти годы мы вместе работали для того, чтобы сохранить страну, превратить ее в современное, свободное, сильное государство, удобное и комфортное для жизни граждан.
Today I've come for the memorial march for Nemtsov. That's very important for me. I couldn't imagine that in the 21st century, in a democratic country, there could be a political contract. I thought it was impossible. As a politician, Nemtsov had millions of followers.
Suspicious as lap time.
A wonderful poster. I didn't get your head. No, that was bad.
That's why it's named Fudo. Oh my god. Oh my god.
What a wonderful poster.
Just realized why it's named Fudo.
Did you have classmates who think like you?
Yes, a few.
But they're not here?
Probably not.
I welcome the contestants and guests to the Russian Kudo Championship. We will now hear the Russian national anthem.
Please get ready. Andrei Nazarov.
проиграл, значит,
I lost. I must have had the wrong mindset.
оказалось, что я не очень хорошо.
I couldn't control my emotions.
It doesn't cover the old colors.
No, funny and tragic. Then we'd have to dye it black.
Возможно, ненароком придется покраситься в черный. Ну, я буду шейдить его.
I've been through that. I'm not going to the graduation dance bald.
I'm fucking stands, man. My fucking car is lower than shit.
So annoying. And then I decided to go back to my next car and take out the piercing.
You've become more grown up.
More grown up? I don't know about that.
The exhibition is about mother-daughter relationships. I have more problems with my father. I was never good enough, and probably never will be. That really depresses me. It's hard for me to love myself and feel that I'm good enough, that I don't have to prove anything to him. This is what they say about us. This generation is hopeless. The girls have lost their morals. Everything about us is bad. We're calculating. We only want men's money. We're just hoping for some mythical man with a huge fortune. They see us as dogs who can't do anything right.
Нас считают, не знаю, придурками, ничего себе не представляющими.
I don't seek my way as a woman. I seek self-fulfillment as a human being, as an individual.
Самореализация, самоактуализация.
I found my way in life. I'm regarded as good. The people I work with say I will very well.
I got his name.
We begin the ceremony with the presentation of certificates to the 2018 high school graduates.
I will fuck you up.
A symbolic bell, which marks not the beginning of the lesson, but the end of school. This graduation certificate is for Cheradeyeva Taisia. I wish you success in everything you do.
Karma. He won. Pit maneuvers should fucking work.
Catherine the Great. Let us welcome the Tsar and Empress as they open the ceremony.
We can't fit much meat in there. No, we fill it with buckwheat. I'm now in my 3rd year of training, in the last semester. At the moment, I'm doing an internship.
Shit, fuck.
Soon there will be the cooking exam and the final assignment at the school. For my final assignment, I've chosen the dish suckling pig. It's a festive dish that used to be served to the SARS. I chose suckling pig because I thought it sounded awesome to have suckling pig in my diploma as my demonstration dish.
That sounds delicious. I can eat a whole fucking pig right now. Know what I'm saying?
Go under the head to stop the head from coming off. Lift it up and lay it under the head. That's good. My boss is great. He explains and shows us everything properly. I'll probably work here later.
I'm finna go buy that Dukes. I don't think I'm gonna sell my Dukes.
I want to graduate from university, do my national service in the army, and fulfill my duties in my homeland. After that, I might work as a military correspondent, reporting about what no one can see. I might get a commission in the armed forces or the Secret Service if I'm declared fit for service. Or I'll go into politics.
Teacher! Leave those kids alone.
Любовь к родине – одно из самых мощных, возвышающих чувств. Она в полной мере проявилась в братской поддержке жителей Крыма и Севастополя, когда они твердо решили вернуться в свой родной дом. Это событие навсегда останется важнейшей вехой в отечественной истории.
A year ago, Taya and I were active in the Navalny movement. We tried to support him wherever we could. On his staff, we signed up as election monitors. Now we've distanced ourselves more, participate less.
Take freedom of speech, for example. Here they put you in prison for a shared post, for something you say online.
He passed a law making it illegal.
The state.
To insult the state.
It applies to statements they don't like.
It's against the Constitution.
Yes.
Where freedom of speech is concerned, if you're openly critical of the state, they can now put you behind bars.
We have no civil society. That hasn't been established yet. Why was there such a decline after Perestroika? It happened because the most active people were at that point in time burned out. And those who still had the energy went abroad. Those who were burnt out stayed, and the others left. And that's how it happened that control over the situation was lost.
Потеряли контроль над ситуацией.
If the meeting was a demo for the admission of opposition candidates to Moscow City Council. All independent candidates have been barred from standing for election.
Взяли и просто по беспределу сняли.
My generation is free. It's freer than our parents' generation. So they try to discourage us, to intimidate us. They threaten us at school because we're freer than our parents. And therefore more of a threat to the powers that be.
Для этой власти, чем наши родители.
service are you looking for? Oh, hey, you're in trouble. Okay, I'll deal with it. You calling for some wheels? I'm Johnny on the spot. I'll hook you up. I'll get there as soon as I can. Okay, I got stuff to do.
Up, you actually cannot see the craft. The light bends around it. You're bending gravity bends light. It bends radio waves. It's it shouldn't be possible to communicate with a craft that has an envelope around it that's distorting all forms of energy. But they were apparently in contact with it.
Somehow or another, through some unexplained way that they didn't bother explaining to you. So this thing gets up, it just does some very simple maneuvers, left, right, goes down. And did they discuss this with you? I mean, they said they wanted you to see it.
No, they just wanted, no, they didn't discuss anything with me. It sat down, we looked around for a bit, and Barry said, let's go back. We went back in the lab. All we got to do was see it. Fast forward to some months later, I did have the test flight schedule of the craft. Now, they had times they had designated high-performance tests. This obviously wasn't one that was a high-performance test. The high-performance test goes above the mountain range, and they do much more radical moves with the thing. Look, this is a prized item, and they're not doing anything like taking it out of the atmosphere or flying around to other countries or anything like that. They just play with this thing right over the test site. But they were doing some radical moves with it. And since I had the test flight schedule, statistically, the amount of traffic in the surrounding areas on the highway was lowest on Wednesdays. And that's why Dennis told us that all the test flights occurred only on Wednesdays, because it'd be the least chance that anyone would see what's going on.
And this was before the government had expanded the forbidden territory around Area 51 and Papoose Lake and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that occurred after my story came out, then people started going up on the mountaintops and trying to look down into there, and they kind of freaked out and then did the land grab and pushed everybody back. But yeah, that I think all that occurred long after that I came out.
So you're working there, and while you're working there, you're under this crazy schedule. Forgive me for explaining your story, but you would get these phone calls. You would have to go to the airport at 11 p.m., and your wife started thinking that you were having an affair.
Yeah, apparently so. Now, I did give my permission to have, as part of the, security clearance process, I gave written permission to have the phones monitored and things of that sort. So they weren't doing any covert stuff. They, with any Q clearance, which is civilian top secret clearance or military top secret clearance, they go talk to friends and, places you've been, make sure you're not connected to foreign countries. But, monitoring your phone is nothing unusual. However, they insisted that, you don't even talk to your loved one, to your partner, to your wife, whatever, about what's going on. So she was essentially in the dark and didn't know the phone was being monitored. Well, part of the security clearance is that not only do you not have any connections to foreign countries and aren't a maniac, but you have to have a stable home life too. Well, she started having an affair with a flight instructor. Now, they were monitoring this on the phone, and they knew it, and I didn't. So they stopped me coming in, and their attitude at the time was, we need to see how this is going to play out, and if Lazar is going to get a little weird or anything. So let's just, hold him off from coming in and, see what happens.
And they explained this to you, what was happening?
Well, after the fact, yeah, because time kind of went on, and there were guys that were following me around, and I started getting a little concerned, going, well, shit, are they booting me out of the project? And if so, they're not just going to let me hang out at home and go get a new job knowing what I know. So as time went on, I started getting a little concerned, and I took my closest friends and just kind of got together, and I said, hey, remember that job I told you about? This is what's going on. And you don't need to take my word for it. Wednesday night, we need to all go out here. I want to show you what's going on. So I took everybody, and we went out to, remember, since I had the test flight schedule, and went outside the base, out into the desert, and so everybody could see, one of the high-performance tests. And, it left quite an imprint on everybody, so they knew I wasn't
And there's videos
crazy.
of these tests, right?
Yeah, but remember, this is it's in the dark in the 80s with a big monster-sized camcorder, and you got, a bright light jumping around. But, yeah, I mean, we did video of it, but there's no, by today's standards, it's...
But is
it's
your
garbage.
video specifically available, the video that you took?
Yeah, well, George Knapp has it.
Is it
I give
online?
it to him.
Do you know?
I have no idea.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I show clips of it in my film. It's online, and someone did a deep analysis of it. It was interesting to take a look at how...
Pull this microphone up to your face. Keep it about a fist from your face.
All right. To see how his video looks now, but as far as video evidence, I mean, we are talking 80s camcorders. The most important thing is the human story here. Everybody that he took up there on 3 separate occasions, they don't all like each other. They don't all talk. They all agree on one thing. They saw something that night at the exact point in time and space that Bob Lazar said. And remember, this is 17 miles south of Area 51. No one even knew really about Area 51. We're talking Papoose Lake, and they all agree. They saw something that night they had never seen before, and they've never seen since, right when he said it. So that's one of the 6 things where I'm like, how did he know? You can dismiss him. I tried to dismiss it. But some things we can't get around, and there's about 5 or 6 of them. How did he know about those?
If Jamie wants to find that video right now, what would he look under?
Bob Lazar, UFO, S for Area 51, just kind of like that. So it's like the S for UFO video, Bob Lazar, and a guy does an analysis, but you're analyzing these 80s videos.
Right.
He from the very beginning, Bob never said, I have proof of my story and I'm going to tell the world. He said at the very beginning, I cannot prove my story. That's not why I'm telling this. George Knapp convinced him to tell people, and he lived through it, and I didn't believe it either until I talked with George.
Okay, so you filmed this test flight, one test flight, and then you get caught.
Actually, it was, I think, the third time, because we went out there the first time. Everybody saw it. Everybody was amazed because it did some radical maneuvers, and everybody had a lot to say about it.
Maneuvers that I've seen the video. It doesn't. I don't think there's something we have now that does that.
No.
In terms of like a human piloted craft. I mean, I don't know, obviously, with the government.
No, it's impossible. Nothing can move like that. And remember, we didn't start filming from the very beginning. We were waiting for something, to happen. The craft took off, and it came flying at us, stopped, turned at a right angle, flew back, and then, after it did some, amazing stuff, to get the camera, and then we started filming. So it doesn't have all of it on there. It just has some.
The way I describe it to my friends when they said, what does this look like? I said, take a laser pointer and then have a wall and then move it around the wall. Like, how it moves around the wall? It doesn't seem like it has anything to do with inertia or physics, or it's not impeded in any way by the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like.
You're essentially separated from reality, as crazy as that sounds, with being encased its own gravitational envelope. Inertia is not going to affect it, and this is how some of those recent sightings with Commander David Fravor, I'm sure you've heard of the Tic Tac UFO. I mean, he describes exactly the thing operates exactly the way I was describing. That's why he was interested to talk to me. But we saw this, and on the way home, it's like, hey, we got away with it. We should try it again the next test flight day. So this became a thing to do, and I think it was on the third time that we got caught. I mean, we started becoming a little careless. I think we took a motorhome out there, and, I mean, it was like the stupidest thing you could possibly imagine.
Started tailgating.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And
again, you're in your 20s.
Yeah, and what was funny was we went out there, and my friend Gene Huff and I were leaning on the front of a vehicle, and just for some reason we just started talking shit. Like, well, I hope they realize that, I don't remember what we were saying, but, that it's something about attacking the base or something along those lines and stealing the craft or something like that.
Something crazy.
And then about 20 feet in front of us, we see a little green light fall on the ground and roll to us. And unbeknownst to us, now it's pitch black, you can't see your hand in front of your face. There were a bunch of guards standing right out there, and they had a night vision scope where they were like from here to the wall looking at us, listening to us, and the guy dropped it, and the scope rolled over to us, and you could see the green screen. We turned the lights on, and all these guys are there. So it was
whoa.
Yeah. So we did incredibly stupid stuff and got caught, as we should have.
So when they catch you and they bring you in, then what happens?
Well, I went in for debriefing. The following day, I went to Indian Springs Air Force Base, which is kind of a defunct base that they used to use at the nuclear test site. And this is when they brought out the transcript of the phone call with my wife. And, they sat me down and we said, when we meant to keep the secret, we meant you can't tell your friends, right? And it just being sarcastic and trying to.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got real serious. But this is where they, took the transcript out and were reading me what my wife and, our friend were talking about. And it was a hard time.
So what happens from there? What do they do with you? Why don't they arrest you?
I don't know. I don't know why. I'm not sure they knew what to do, but they did let me go that night, and I went home. And this is kind of when the most stressful part started.
Because you're realizing you're being monitored.
Yeah, now
24/7.
Now I know not only am I being monitored, but now I know I'm in trouble. And it wasn't a short time after that I contacted, at that time the only investigative reporter I had heard of in Las Vegas was George Knapp, and told him some of the story, because I had no idea what the hell was going to happen at that point.
So George Knapp tries to dissect your story, tries to find holes in it, tells it, puts it online, and makes everybody aware of it, and that's how I found out.
Yeah, to make a long story short.
What happens, yeah, to really make a long story short, what happens from there on? I mean, do they contact you and say, hey, Bob, it's probably a good idea if you shut up? Did they try to label you as crazy? Was there...
There were a lot of things that happened at, between that point. I'm leaving out a lot of stuff to fill in the story. We'd have to go back to Los Alamos and well, I really don't want to talk about that. The
top secret weapons stuff that you were working on.
No, I'm talking about the 115.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I have to think about how I...
What is the problem with this?
I don't want to get myself into more trouble by admitting something. So I just have to dance around a couple.
He was rated just during the filming of the movie. People thought it was
the movie's great, by the way.
Thanks, Joe.
And it's on Netflix right now if anybody wants to check it out. And if you're one of those people like me who, I've always loved the idea of UFOs. I became extremely weary talking to people who are UFO believers and UFO fanatics because there's so many of them that are full of shit. And not just full of shit, they're childishly delirious. Like the way they talk about things. I mean, there's so many people that I'm in contact. They reach me in the night and they explain to me what we're doing to the ocean is wrong. And you're like, okay.
This is one of the reasons I didn't want to do the show.
I'm sure.
Well, no, it's no. Yeah, well. It's no joke. We've had people literally camp out on our front lawn, and in some ways I can relate to some of these people. Maybe some of them did really have some kind of experience or saw something, and all their friends think they're crazy. But hey, now there's this guy I heard on the radio, and at least he knows I'm not full of shit, so I gotta talk to him.
Right.
And so most of the correspondence I get are people trying to get a hold of me, going, Bob, you got to listen to me. I'm coming to talk to you. I'm driving from Oklahoma or whatever, but some of them are just fucking bad shit crazy, and they're frightening.
There's a lot of schizophrenics that are involved in the conspiracy world. So there's a lot of people that have real issues.
Joe, it would be a disservice to your audience to not say that we have to look at what's going on now and understand. I've heard on your show a bunch of stuff about what's going on now, and to not really understand what's going on now, you can't see Bob's story in the correct light after 30 years. And at some point we should just touch upon that. The biggest being that things like the Tic Tac UFO case that came out, I've heard people, even on this show, say, oh, there's a glitch in the radar. That's a data poor perspective. You just don't know yet what's really going on. Commander Fravor, I was able to get the interview with him to talk with him way before it became public. I got that from him. He saw it. Other pilots saw it. This is a big thing that's going on right now. They had more sightings on the East Coast recently. Cubes with spherical ores. These are not aerodynamic, and these are the people we trust to defend us on 9/11. Commander Fravor protected Los Angeles on 9/11. So we trust them, but they're not trained observers. Radar, individuals see these things, and the big one, just to throw down so we can consider a story a little differently, just more depth to it. The big one is the United States government has admitted that they have been continuously studying the UFO phenomenon. That program was called ATIP, was called OSAP. That's the mother program. George Knapp got that out. They announced through the New York Times about ATIP, but OSAP, these acronyms, OSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapon Systems Applications Program, who cares? That was the mother program. So they've admitted we didn't stop studying UFOs in 1969 with Project Blue Book. We don't think it's crazy. We actually want to reverse engineer the technology. That's why on your other show, you said, what's this AAV thing? It's like they're making up another UFO name. Well, hold on, there's a reason. Because in the documents, the DIA documents that George Knapp released, that everybody said was fake till now they know is real, they call them AAVs, which is Advanced Aerospace Vehicles. People are getting the acronyms wrong. So the reason for the terminology change is so that we can mimic what we're reading in the DIA documents. People can look for that now. So they changed the names to get people away from UFO or UAP, even like Hillary Clinton said on air, right? So
what are you talking about?
Hillary Clinton informed the public on Jimmy Kimmel, oh, Jimmy, we don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Right? So she kind of was giving, the Clintons are very into the UFO topic. Senator Reid, you know, he's done a lot for the subject, the study of it, right? So she informed the public so they could look for the right term. So these terms are important because the DIA, in those documents, they've been calling them AAVs for quite some time now.
And they changed the name to anomalous.
No, that's kind of a misnomer.
No?
So they always mess around with things, but it's actually advanced.
Right, but when they're describing it in the news, they were calling it anomalous aerospace vehicles.
Totally, and that's cool. They were also saying anomalous aerospace threats, AAT, right? Because they want the sense of a threat.
Right.
So my point is, if people don't know this now and they think this stuff is fantasy, this part of it, that we're studying it, that we take it seriously, we're spending money on it.
Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. The moon has always been an object of fascination for mankind. It's a prominent view in our night sky, a moon massive and close enough that its beautiful and eerie details are visible with the naked eye. Mankind stepped on the moon over 5 decades ago, but to this day, there's still so much we don't know about it, and that's why we keep going back and keep exploring. While the moon seems like a very different place from Earth, there's one thing that excites scientists about future colonization prospects.
Helium-3?
There is increasing evidence of water on the moon.
No? Okay.
I'm Alex McColgan, and you're watching Astrum.
I think
Join
Helium
with
3
me
is
today
just
as
a
we
great
follow the
fucking
progress
idea.
numerous space agencies
Great
around the
reason
world
to go there.
have made to find out once and for all whether the moon's surface contains water. Luna 24 was an ambitious robotic probe of the Soviet Union in 1976. It successfully landed on the moon, drilled into the lunar surface about 2 meters deep, and sent about 170 grams of lunar soil samples back to Earth. Of greatest surprise to the scientists was the detection of water within the return sample. Around 0.1% of the sample was water, and they found that the concentration of water increased with depth. However, like the very trace amounts of water detected in samples obtained during earlier moon missions, for example Apollo 11, this was assumed to be a contamination from Earth. The question whether there is water on the moon remained unanswered. In 1994, NASA's Clementine mission showed that permanently shadowed areas that haven't received any sunlight in billions of years do exist near the moon's south pole. As a result of this, there was a lot of excitement in the science community about whether there could be frozen ice at the bottom of these craters, protected from the harsh rays of the sun, where the temperatures would never rise above about minus 173 degrees Celsius. Any water ice at the bottom of these craters could probably exist indefinitely at these temperatures. Excited by this discovery, NASA launched the Lunar Prospector spacecraft shortly afterwards in 1998, specifically to hunt for clues that water may exist there. While it didn't give us any conclusive answers to the mystery, it certainly added to the intrigue. The Lunar Prospector detected large amounts of hydrogen at the moon's poles using spectroscopy from orbit. Data from Prospector suggested that there could be somewhere between 10 to 300 million tons of water ice scattered inside craters around the lunar poles. But large amounts of hydrogen do not necessarily mean the presence of water. It could also be water's closest chemical relative, hydroxyl. The Prospector spacecraft subsequently crashed into the moon's south pole in 1999, with NASA scientists hoping the impact would blast ejecta into space, lit up by the sun, so that scientists could use spectroscopy to prove the existence of water in the dark craters of the moon using Earth-based telescopes. Unfortunately, no water ice was detected from the lunar prospector's impact. The mystery continued. Japan's Selene, or Kaguya spacecraft, was launched in 2007, and its mission was to take high-resolution images of the moon and map the lunar surface. But it also wasn't able to detect signs of water ice in permanently shadowed craters around the south pole of the moon. So, after 18 months of orbiting, it too purposefully crashed into the moon, hoping that this time it would release enough ejecta into space for Earth-based observatories to work with. But again, no evidence for water was found. In 2008, India's first moon mission, Chandrayaan-1, was launched. Chandrayaan-1 was different from previous missions in that instead of relying on sensors to detect water from a distance, India included an impactor that could specifically detect water in its gaseous form through spectroscopy as it came in close proximity to the spacecraft. Scientists believe water vapor could be in the extremely tenuous atmosphere of the moon just above these craters.
Hey, this is bullshit. I don't have any mods.
From the main body of the spacecraft and
Total
descended for
bullshit.
25
Total
minutes before it
absolute
crashed near
bullshit.
a crater at the south pole of the moon. As it descended, it sent the data back to the Chandrayaan-1 mothership, and within that data was the answers scientists had been looking for all these decades: a confirmation of water. And a few months later, the Moon Mineralogy Mapper instrument aboard Chandrayaan-1, using spectroscopy from orbit, also detected the presence of water on the moon. But NASA wanted more proof. They launched their own Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite mission, as well as the LRO, an orbiter you will be very familiar with if you follow this channel. LCROSS was a simple, low-cost, fast-track mission, and it had one main objective, which was to once and for all confirm the presence or absence of water ice in a permanently shadowed crater near a lunar polar region. It had a simple, straightforward, yet very clever design. In an unusual move, the first stage of the Atlas V rocket LCROSS was launched from stayed attached to the spacecraft, and upon reaching the moon, it was released to crash into one of the dark craters at the south pole of the moon. This impact was similar to how Lunar Prospector and Japan's Kaguya probes crashed into the moon to eject a debris plume that rose above the lunar surface. But unlike them, the LCROSS spacecraft itself flew through the debris and collected data without relying on Earth-based observatories, which clearly weren't very reliable for studying small plumes of debris. As the debris cloud rose above the crater's rim, it was exposed to sunlight, and any water ice and other molecules of interest were vaporized and broken down into their basic components, which the sensors on board LCROSS were able to detect, only for it to crash into the moon too after accomplishing its task. This combination of collisions produced a large plume of surface material, which the LRO was left to study. The data sent back from this mission showed that the lunar soil within shadowy craters is rich in useful materials such as hydrogen gas, ammonia, and methane, which could be used to produce fuel for space missions. And it even settled the debate of whether water was present, as the data heavily suggested that hydrogen found at the lunar poles does indeed belong to crystals of water ice. And it doesn't stop there. Recently, NASA's SOFIA discovered water on the sunlit surface of the moon. Its data suggests that water on the moon may not just be limited to cold and shadowed places, but may be distributed across the lunar surface.
Class tent cities were erected, and there were
just during the filming of the movie, people thought,
we don't know about it.
Who cares? That was
late to some of these people. It wasn't a short time after
Great, just during the filming of the movie, people
Yeah,
thought it
the
was made
movie's
up.
great, by the way.
Thanks, Joe.
And it's on Netflix right now if anybody wants to check it out. And if you're one of those people like me who, you know, I've always loved the idea of UFOs. I became extremely weary talking to people who are UFO believers and like the way they talk about things. I mean, there's so many people.
I get are people trying to get a hold of me. Come on, Bob, you got to listen to me. I'm coming to talk to you. You know,
Right.
I'm driving from Oklahoma or whatever, and but some of them are just fucking bad shit crazy, and
Yeah.
they're frightening.
There's a lot of schizophrenics that are involved in the conspiracy world. So there's a lot of people that have real issues.
Joe, it would be a disservice to your audience to not say that we have to look at what's going on now. Biggest being that things like the Tic Tac on Jimmy Kimmel, she informed the public so they could look for the right term. So these terms are important because the DIA in those aerospace vehicles, people are getting the acronyms wrong. So the reason for the terminology change is so that
Gotta listen to me. I'm coming to talk to you. Really have some kind of experience who saw something, and all their friends think.
for quite some time now.
And they changed the name to Anomaly.
There's on Jimmy Kimmel. Oh, Jimmy, we don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them UAPs. It's the DIA documents that George. It's but OSAP, these acronyms. OSAP has it's the DIA documents that George Knapp released, that everybody said has admitted that they have been continuously studying 11. So we trust them, but they're not trained observers. Radar, individuals see these things, and the big one, just to throw down so we can consider a story a little differently, just more depth to it. The big one is, United States government has admitted that they have been continuously studying the UFO phenomenon. That program was called ATIP, was called OSAP. That's the mother program. George Knapp got they announced to the New York Times about ATIP, but OSAP, these acronyms, AWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapon Systems Applications Program. Who cares? That was the mother program. So they've admitted we didn't stop studying UFOs in 1969 for Project Blue Book. We don't think it's crazy. We actually want to reverse engineer the technology. That's why on your other show, you said, what's this AAV thing? It's like they're making up another UFO name. Well, hold on, there's a reason. Because in the documents, the DIA documents that George Knapp released, that everybody said was fake till now they know is real, they call them AAVs, which is Advanced Aerospace Vehicles. People are getting the acronyms wrong. So the reason for the terminology change is so that we can mimic what we're reading in the DIA documents. People can look for that now. So they changed the names to get people away from UFO or UAP, even like Hillary Clinton said on air, right? So
what are you talking about?
Hillary Clinton informed the public on Jimmy Kimmel, oh Jimmy, we don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. Right, so she kind of was giving, the Clintons are very into the UFO topic. Senator Reid, he's done a lot for the subject, the study of it, right? So she informed the public so they could look for the right term. So these terms are important because the DIA, in those documents, they've been calling them AAVs for quite some time now.
And they changed the name.
Kind of was giving, the Clintons are very into the UFO topic. Senator Reid, he's done a lot for the subject, the study of it, right? So
what are you talking about?
Hillary Clinton informed the public on Jimmy Kimmel, oh Jimmy, we don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena.
I'm coming to talk to you. I'm
Right.
I'm driving from Oklahoma or whatever, but some of them are just fucking batshit crazy, and
Yeah.
they're frightening.
There's a lot of schizophrenics that are involved in the conspiracy world. So there's a lot of people that have real issues.
Joe, it would be a disservice to your audience to not say that we have to look at what's going on now and understand. I've heard on your show a bunch of stuff about what's going on now, and to not really understand what's going on now, you can't see Bob's story in the correct light after 30 years. And at some point we should just touch upon that. The biggest being that things like the Tic Tac UFO case that came out, I've heard people, even on the show, say, oh, there's a glitch in the radar. That's a data for perspective. You just don't know yet what's really going on. Commander Fravor, I was able to get the interview with him to talk to him way before it became public. I got that from him. He saw it. Other pilots saw it. This is a big thing that's going on right now. They had more sightings on the East Coast recently. Cubes with spherical ores. These are not aerodynamic, and these are the people we trust to defend us on 9/11. Commander Fravor protected Los Angeles on 9/11. So we trust them, but they're not trained observers. Radar, individuals see these things, and the big one, just to throw